Tom and Ben from Trancestate.
What's happening?
Hello.
An Albury-Wodonga based band that we're going to talk about. It's pretty heavy stuff. It's pretty listenable at the same time, and there's a bit of Wagga heritage in this room at the moment as well. So as this show is focusing on the entire area, it's good to have people that are based here now but have come from slightly different places around the area, which is something I'll bring up later, is something to do with music festivals, which Wagga used to have lots of and now has none. So I was going to talk to you about that. But first, the way this show works is a bit different. Normally we go kind of start at the end, so you guys get a chance to talk about what you're doing now, so we don't run out of time. So you just want to tell us about the band, where the name comes from. We had a bit of a pre-chat, and I know there's a bit more to the name, which I did say to the guys that I had completely confused and had made up a word in my head, which it turned out to be more complicated than the actual word is to say. So sort of take us through how to say it.
It's still kind of a cool word. You did well there, man. The band name is Trancestate.
Trancestate, yeah. Which is basically another word for saying flow state, which creative people will know as like...
High.
Yeah. It's the point where you forget what you're doing and you're just in the zone, and that's usually when you create your best stuff. So that's what we're always chasing. So probably would have called it flow state if it wasn't already taken, so that would have been way cooler.
No, I think that Trancestate does sound better.
Yeah.
And when you said earlier, Tom, that there's something behind the name, I thought trance. I got hung up on the word trance. I thought, wow, are you guys going to be the world's heaviest doom stoner band? Is that what you're going for? Or?
We've had a lot of people, like, they see our ads and stuff and then they're like, it's not trancey enough. I'm like, oh, it's not about trance.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happens. People get hung up on the name.
Do you think that's also because the music itself has a bit of an electronic element too, that they think that maybe the trance element's going to be stronger in there?
It does work to a degree, but we're definitely not
You're not
trance band.
No, not. And we're probably never going to be, realistically.
Yeah. I'd love to be, but I'm honest.
I'd sing with auto-tune. For sure.
So maybe just starting with you, Ben, do you just want to take us through what the band actually does sound like, and then we can start moving backwards in time and work out how we got to this point?
It's probably the hardest question you could have asked us.
Well, maybe not what it sounds like. What do you want it to sound like? What
Basically, we just want to write music that we ourselves like. We both have quite an eclectic taste in music. We like dance, but particularly we like dance music. We like heavy music, and in particular, we like the sort of this new modern wave of progressive heavy music. And that's sort of what we were trying to achieve, while at the same time putting our own stamp on it. Which we didn't really try to. It just sort of, that's how it came out.
It's basically really heavy music, but it's always got the groove of dance music there. Like, we try to make it as fun as possible.
Yeah. While at the same time being, keeping it heavy, keeping it aggressive.
Yeah.
So I've basically, the whole time I've known both of you guys, which would be well in excess of a decade now.
We were talking about this before. You gave us our first gig at Sodens.
Yeah.
It looked terrible too.
Yeah. Right. Well, I remember I do have some notes about where I thought your bands were at the time, and there was a point where certain bands that you're in were among the better bands in the region. So
when we were talking about that, I was just like, well, it was because of you that Tom and I met.
Yeah.
It was when Nemesfixia played with Nemesfixia and my old band Netherrealm played with 5 Star Prison Cell at Sodens.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that was 2000 and
that would have been 07 or 08.
Probably. I think it was 08 because I'd seen 5 Star earlier that year with the Dillinger Escape Plan. And so by then I was just like, Adam Glenn. They came to Albury and we played with Tom's old band, and I think that's where it all.
I was underage. I had to leave straight after.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that was
I was never 18 when Sodens was open. How interesting is that?
I had everyone's age, text file, just so I never got caught out. And trust me, as annoying as that was for you, it was more annoying for me because I had to make a prick of myself every week kicking someone out.
Yeah,
that fine.
Before we get too sidetracked, just on that, there was actually a Christmas party that I think the band that you might have been in, Ben, before. Actually, it might not have been you, actually. there was a heavy band that were headlining a gig, and then a young band from Melbourne turned up. And they might have originally been from Wangaratta. They were a hardcore band, and they had a bit of buzz going on. They were all underage, and they rocked. They weren't even booked for the gig. Someone else who was on the gig had asked them to come play without actually checking with the venue.
Oh, God.
And they turned up at 4 PM with no adults. So even if there was a spot for them, they got kicked out straight away and had to drive back to Melbourne. So that was just part of the weird and wonderful world back then.
Oh, yeah.
But what I was earlier going to say was that you guys, I've known you always to have pretty eclectic taste. Like I know that at one point where before Ben and I were both driving, which I think happened probably later in life for both of us than what it would for a normal person, we were taking the bus on, I was teaching music in Wodonga.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you were doing. We had a lot of conversations about bands that no one else was listening to, Glassjaw, Dillinger Escape Planner at the time.
Yeah.
You got me listening to Devon Townsend, which I'd never really given a chance.
Yeah.
So, and Tom, I remember you were just a crazy carnival head.
I remember when Soundawake came out and me and you had a conversation about it.
Yeah, and I was never a fan, and I think that might have broken your heart at the time because there was a certain group of the Wagga boys that genuinely thought that was the greatest achievement in Australian music ever. And I just didn't really get it. So, yeah, but I've obviously always known you guys are pretty eclectic in your taste. Yeah. And when I first heard the new band, it didn't actually sound... It sounded like a natural progression of where I'd always thought you guys had interests anyway. They just all kind of come together.
Yeah. Like through, like, particularly, like, when I first started, you know, taking music seriously, taking being in bands seriously, I'd always sort of wanted to do like a sort of more progressive sort of style band, you know, along the lines of like Meshuggah or Devon Townsend and that sort of thing. And it always kind of upset me that Tom's old band was actually going in that direction.
And you weren't in it.
And I wasn't in it. And there was a guy, but yet there was this guy in there that was singing and not writing lyrics. And I was just like, I can write lyrics.
I love you, Scott.
Love you, Scotty.
If you're listening.
But it was just really cool that we'd already known each other for so many years when Tom approached me to work with him, and it was just really good to finally get a chance to do this style of music. And it's, for me anyway, I think you've said it to me before, that this is always the style that I should have been singing in the past. And
I saw you in bands and I was always like, I could see him doing this, what we're doing now. Like, it's vocal music, it's all about him, really. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and for the people listening, I might see if the guys are okay with giving me a couple of small samples of music. So it makes more sense, and I'll edit these in throughout the podcast. As I said earlier, you guys were in bands that became really, really tight and really good in the past, but they were maybe not so much Nemesis because they went slightly more progressive earlier. Yeah. But Ben, you were in a band, I think it was NetherRealm at the time, that were very, very good at a classic style of metal that maybe creatively probably not as broad as maybe the bands that you've been in since or this project, but also you guys kind of more focused on we know what this genre is. Yeah. Let's try and be really good at that.
Yeah, like
that sphere.
Yeah, but like with NetherRealm, like we'd found our niche and we were going to stick to that. Like we weren't even when we started, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. We just wanted to write fast, aggressive music and basically showcase our drummer. That's what you do when you start a thrash death metal band. You showcase the drummer. Everybody else is just...
or anyone else in the band with above average level talent. Yeah, there's always someone in the band that's a freak.
Yeah. But, and then, you know, it was the same with the band after it. Like, you know, we had these eclectic tastes, but then again, like, we were just trying to, like, we want to be heavy, so we might as well just stick to that.
And one thing I noticed from what I've heard, what you guys have been doing, is that you have managed to do what the bands that I've been in, which were always seen as lighter, more progressive kind of bands. Our bands were maybe more like a stripped back version of like what 12 Foot Ninja do, where they have a bit that sounds like this and then jammed against it's a bit that sounds like that and then another bit and then maybe the bit from the start will come back in a different form. But it's almost like weird genre. Yeah. And whereas you guys seem to be mixing a lot of sound all at the same time together. Was that something you were conscious of, or was that just how it's turned out? Because the through line is it's all very heavy.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of what I do. Like, I don't even know that I do it. Like, we're trying to teach live members at the moment, and things that just seem like whatever to me. They're like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, I've copped that for 20 years.
Yeah. You just have a weird brain, and yeah.
But I mean, it's something that I don't think we ever got right with my old band. Meshing strange sounds and more listenable sounds together in the same moment.
Yeah.
It was always a bit, then another bit.
A lot.
It's pretty tough. I mean, how you guys are doing it, I think, is certainly the better option, because I found that people always reacted as though our music was disjointed.
Yeah, I get. Yeah. Although I like a lot of music like that.
Yeah.
Bit of prog.
Yeah.
Prog head,
Yeah. Righto, so I think we might go back a bit now. So we've got a feel for the band. It's heavy, there's an electric element, and I'll drop some in hopefully, and then the people who are still listening will know what it's like. So I just want to go back now, and we might just start with the Wagga scene.
Yeah.
You obviously were a baby when you were first out there playing gigs.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah. And the scene was well and truly alive, particularly in those heavier genres over there. Where do you have any feeling as to where the Wagga scene is now? And I know that the Home Tavern, for example, is closed, and there was the Last Dime Day recently, which is something else we might talk about, given that I wasn't as close to that community. I'm fascinated with what it was and what it became. So just start anywhere you want there, and
So I was there at the last one.
Is in the Last Dime
December,
Day.
And they are really struggling to find another venue. Yeah, I talked to them. They said there's not much in town that's willing to do it. They all have noise restrictions. They can't go past certain times, and I think everywhere's dealing with these issues with live venues at the moment. Yeah,
that was something that really only became an issue maybe in the mid 2000s-ish. I found was the idea of maybe councils particularly really bending over to people, for the lack of a better term, that had a noise complaint, because a lot of it was a singular, discrete individual making a lot of noise about a lot of noise.
That lives near a nightclub and complains about it.
I remember there was a huge issue with somebody who lived near the Bendigo, I think, in Melbourne. They lived like really close to the Bendigo Hotel, and they were complaining about the amount of noise coming from it. And it just, like, for me personally, it was just like, why, sorry for my language, why the fuck do you live so close to a...
say anything you like. Maybe not the C word. I might edit that out.
Why the fuck are you living so close to a live music venue?
Yeah, particularly one, getting back to the Home. The Home, to me, although maybe it was never quite as pure original music as Sodens, they were somewhat analogous. They were very old buildings in an old part of the street, and they had a lot of heritage.
They made it very easy for you to put shows there too.
Very easy to put a show on. Maybe, to be honest, I mean, I was booking a lot of the shows at Sodens. It was easier to get a gig at the Home than
there
it
was
with
a period of time where they weren't even charging to book it. They were just, we'll just make the money off the alcohol, and we're happy with that. Like,
so it was but those older venues, and I think that was part of why the scene did take a little dip in the region, was that noise complaints were just becoming so prevalent that the venue owners, and I can't speak directly for the owners of Sodens at the time, but that was where a lot of the issues with the pub started. Was it doesn't just affect what's happening on the night, it affects what you're doing during the week. You're fending off the complaint, whatever, if there happens to be legal action, which I'm not sure there was in either case, but if that's happening, you've got to fight that. You've got to, debate with the council as to, if you're a 150-year-old venue, why someone who moved next door in the 70s should have an opinion. The pub was already there. It's not a fucking mirage.
Like that's exactly right. Like, if you move next door to a pub, like, regardless of whether it's hosting live music or whether it's just basically a fucking glorified TAB. If you move in next door, you got to expect it to be noisy from time to time. Like,
just living in town, full stop.
Yeah, it's exactly it.
You know that drunk people are going to be yelling their heads off walking past your house.
If you don't like the noise, go and live on a fucking farm.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, it would be not dissimilar to moving in next to the train station and having a bitch that occasionally there's a horn and maybe a carriage goes past it. So that was probably started when things became a little bit tougher. But one thing about Wagga, which I think always, and Albury's actually moved a little bit more this way recently, is that Wagga always had a broader idea of what was the live music scene than Albury.
Yeah.
Around here, it was almost like little Melbourne. You're an original band, and if you played one cover, that was borderline.
Yeah.
Some of the metal bands did excellent covers, so you guys got away with it more because you were so authentic to the originals, but other bands didn't. And then there was cover bands over here.
Yeah.
They weren't really part of the scene.
No.
Wagga was, because it was surrounded by towns that had B&Ss and all of these functions and military functions, all of that stuff that was happening over there. The cover scene and the original scene were happening in the same venues, even sometimes on the same nights. Not on the same bills, but upstairs, downstairs, or...
Which is how it traditionally used to be. Like, you could like all the big super bands from the day they all started as cover bands.
The Beatles,
and then
Rolling Stones.
they hang out with the original artists and they learn from them, and it's how it's supposed to be. But
because there didn't seem to be as much hostility towards those kinds of musicians over in Wagga, and
it was a cool place at that time. It was a
and
really
there were a lot
community,
of I think maybe not because of that, but there were a lot of high caliber actual players over there. Like some of the better technical players that I've met were people that were based in Wagga at the time.
Yeah.
Do you think that was that to do with how strong the scene was, or was there a really good music education system set up over
too.
there?
I worked at a music school in Wagga that it's still open, I think, but it was massive at that time. There was every kid that was trying to do anything was coming through there, and I think you know Sean Daniel.
I do. Yeah.
He was the teacher there. He's just a freak.
He's a freak.
Yeah.
And like,
I'm hoping to get him on here at one point to really talk about the Home Tavern closing down.
Get him talking about guitar nerd stuff, and you'll go down a rabbit hole, but you'll learn something.
like there were kids like go to that school like just like that are like doing big things now, like Lalick from Wind Waker.
Yeah.
Is a former student of Tom's.
Yeah.
You know.
Just to counterpoint that, when everything was happening with Sodens, Ben, do you think that we knew at the time that the scene was so dependent on one venue? Like, I was inside the bubble. I was actually inside. I didn't realise, because I was just trying to stay on top of booking bands every week. I didn't understand that if this goes by the wayside, the scene is just going to fall in a toilet. It didn't feel like that because we also had the youth stuff that was happening in Albury and Wodonga at the time.
That's what I was going to bring up too, is Wagga had a massive all-ages scene as well. We used to do huge all-ages shows, and then overnight, no one wanted to do them anymore. They just cut it.
Yeah, well, Ben would remember that stuff disappeared. I mean, you were involved with, I think I met you.
When
you were volunteering for.
Yeah, when I was volunteering with Freezer, and then like as well, and then I was kind of involved in bands at that point. But I think the problem with the scene, it was like, it was, even though we didn't realise it, was that how dependent we were on Sodens as a live venue. Because then after Sodens went, all we really had was the Retro Youth Cafe. And it wasn't until, God, it was like a year or so later when the fucking Carriers of all places started. The old Swinging Arms started doing shows. And like back then, like when they first started though, like they still had that cool Sodens vibe. Like they're just, how rowdy the crowd were and that. Like, but in saying that though, like there's never going to be another venue like Sodens.
Yes.
Like,
do you think though that may have been part of the problem? Was that people, like, I didn't realise it because I was just trying to do my job at the time, and I was trying to separate the music scene, which was my job to make gigs happen, from my own musical aspirations for the scene itself and my own band. Do you think maybe the problem was that there wasn't any other viable options that people had put any time into?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like, Sodens became an entity unto itself, realistically. Yeah. It was an institution. It was.
Still is.
Yeah, it still is.
I go home and you tell Sodens stories. That's what you do.
It was a magical time.
I think I've been in there once since the remodel, and I walked into the bistro, which used to be the beer garden.
Cry?
I did cry. I was just like, I had my 21st. What the fuck is this?
I remember your 21st, actually.
Oh,
you mention it.
That was brutal. Apparently Farrell was there, and I don't remember that shit. Mum had pictures, and I'd never got them off her. But
yeah, actually, I remember the way the room was laid out. I don't remember so much the party itself.
Yeah,
I must have seen it maybe before it happened, earlier in the night.
Yeah, like there was. I insisted, like, because like Mum was like, "Oh, do you want like black and red everywhere because you're so fucking metal?" And I was just like, "Nah, put a whole heap of pink balloons up everywhere and purple streamers."
It was hilarious.
Like, well, at least you're alienating any kind of football team.
Yes, well, that's true. You did do that. I think with the scene was very fragile, and even we thought that it was maybe not so much in Wagga, because you guys had there was the saloon bar, and there was also the Home Tavern, and there was also at the time still a lot of underage stuff, which around 08, 09 had already started to dip off a little bit. The Albury stuff was only happening really at the youth cafe, whereas they used to do a lot of big productions. I don't think that. I mean, I wasn't in a position because I was working for the hotel to build up any other venues, and I probably wouldn't have had the energy to, even if I wanted to. But do you think maybe that, not so much out of laziness, but do you think that we all just took that as a gut punch, Ben, and we just didn't do much as a scene for a long time?
Oh, definitely.
Because you are right, it took 12 months for anyone to get the kahunas up to try and do something somewhere else.
It wasn't the fact that we were lazy or anything like that. It was just the fact that like a lot of venues still had that stigma attached that like heavy music was this really dangerous thing, and that heavy music fans were really dangerous people, and like, you know, mosh pits were violent and all of this crap and rah. And it wasn't until like sort of in the last, God, not even 10 years that stigma really seems to have died down. Like, I remember we played at my old band, we played at fucking One of all places. And like, to Bernard's credit, he would market every single heavy music show that he had there, like he was marketing a DJ. He did a terrific job, and he really helped pick the scene up when it was starting to fall down. Yeah. And I remember, like, I always had this thing. I'd go and talk to security guards and say, you know, thank you for doing such a good job and all of this crap. And you know, it was no different this night. And I was like, you know, thank you for doing such a good job. He's like, I didn't do fucking nothing. You guys look after yourselves, sort of thing. And that's sort of that's when I sort of started to notice a shift. Like, and nowadays there's more venues that are actually putting on the shows, which is
because it's you are right. There was a stigma. I'm not sure whether it was the iconography and the symbolism of metal more than the people.
And it's actually the opposite. Like, that's how the whole scene thrives. It's a community. That's why people turn to it, because they can walk in and know that everyone there is their friend. Like,
like we go there to listen to some tunes, watch some bands, and drink some beer. Like,
I mean, part of the reason why we had such a focus on it, well, there was three things. It worked. Not very much works. That's something that people don't realise. And many genres of music just do not work financially, and you put yourself in a hole trying to keep it going. There was never any trouble. Unless there was maybe two individuals that had personal issues, which, I mean, that could manifest anywhere regardless of where it was, if two people just personally hate each other. And the other thing was that the scene, there was the amount of consumption was always so much better compared to the amount of trouble. Like, it was a big spending, hard drinking crowd within the confines of not letting people get totally blasted and hurt themselves or whatever. And the crowd itself, you get 100 people in for a metal show, and it would be equivalent to a much bigger show on a different night for a different genre. And just to put a cap on that particular point, I remember the most I ever felt endangered running a gig was a fight between two couples that almost started at the door of an Evermore concert. These two dudes were, well, to be honest, they must have been playing O&M football or something. They were absolute humongous chiseled dudes, and they did not like each other for some reason. And they happened to be in line next to each other. And when they turned around and realised it was on, So something had happened there in the past.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I ever felt unsafe at that particular place.
At an Evermore gig.
Was at an Evermore concert.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, this is music that was, on the OC or something at the time. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that you're right that the scene probably was treated a bit unfairly. And I guess the other thing was that there was a stigma that Sodens was the metal pub and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Which it was nothing to do with what was happening.
It was only one night a month, or not even that it's actually doing that.
That was it. Like,
so I mean, there were things that were working, like the actual metal nights on Thursdays that started to just see a natural decline because people get older and busier and they don't go out as much. And that was, so there was other pressures. So just getting back maybe to Wagga, that scene seemed to continue for a while, but there were things happening in Wagga. Like I recall Dusty Days, for example, the festival. And there was stuff that used to happen at the Wagga Music Bowl, which was that outdoor natural amphitheatre type stage. Where did all that stuff go?
I'm not too sure about Dusty Days.
Was that not a success?
That was a council-run thing, so I'm not sure what happened with that. That was, they did it for like 3 years and then just stopped.
I'm assuming I'm not talking before your time with Dusty Days.
No, I remember going to it. I was underage, but it was an underage festival.
It's an all-age event,
But yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Music Bowl, we did a...
Isn't there a Spin Effects? Is that the name of the band? Or
Carnifex, yeah. They're like...
Yeah.
It was just a massive flop. But it's just too big a venue. Like, that venue's meant to hold 5,000, 10,000 people. And, and like 200 and something came, but it looked like 10 people. That just doesn't work.
And like it would have been all right for that show. It's like there'd been like bigger bands, but like Carnifex and like it was Darkest Hour.
Yeah, they're pretty decent bands.
Yeah,
but
like they were still like on the up and up.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
They would have been better off putting it on at the home and just having a good night, and that would have been packed. It seemed great.
Yeah, okay, so
even at a civic centre or something like that.
Yeah, because I do remember, although I by that point had no time for the band really as far as a listener, I remember there was a massive Parkway Drive show over there.
Oh, but they can play anywhere and sell it out.
And I remember thinking at the time that I thought that maybe shows like that for bands of that size were going to sustain at least the Wagga side of things for a fair while. But it just...
I think Parkway just does their own thing. They've always done regional tours.
It was without realising just how big that band actually was. Even then, like it's hard. Like now they're obviously a giant band, but
and they still do regional tours. Like it's just what they do.
Yeah, so that was probably a bit of a false signal that bands were still going to pull big crowds over there. And I mean, Ben would know there was a lot of festivals here throughout the years. That there was SummerSlam 2003, I think that was. There was my old band, my first band played on the Groove and the Moo the second year that happened.
Yeah, I remember it was here for a while,
there was another festival that got organised out near the Edamoga pub that didn't end up even happening. I think that had Cog and Gyroscope on the bill.
I remember that,
Yeah, that's a fucking shit show, let's be honest.
That was organised by that Tristan Daniel. Yeah. That VI space cuck. Anything that had his name on it was generally bound to fail. Yeah, like he was one of those dudes that had all these big dreams, and but then he just couldn't back them up.
Yeah, and that's just another gut punch for the scene, that some of the people that were drawing resources and time out of the community were letting people down.
I was going to say that before. That was what went wrong with Wagga, was just irresponsible promoters and
irresponsible promoters on a booking agents.
Metal night once a week, every Thursday night, and then it's the scene's fault when people stop coming. Like it's just
there's an interesting point. It might be a good way to move off Wagga and come a bit more into the present. There was a little bit of language around the home closing that it's up to the scene to get out and support the bands, and then there's obviously the other side of the argument that the bands weren't drawing the people. So not that either side's right, and it's not meant to be a leading question. How do you guys feel about that as guys that have now been in multiple bands and having been playing live for, a decade or more? Where do you think that onus falls for an original act when it comes to pulling people?
It's definitely both.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you definitely get the local bands feeling entitled, we're from here, so we should be able to sell it out thing when they're just not good enough to do it, you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need the people to support it as well. So it's definitely a bit
So
of
I'm going to
both.
speak maybe more from the inside here, and then I'll let Ben disagree with me. Hopefully he does. Yeah. The thing that I don't think people realise when you're actually booking shows is that, and I can speak as someone who was in a band and was also a booker of a venue, you've only got X amount of minutes a week that you can dedicate to one of the 10 shows maybe you're trying to put on for that month. So the amount of resources you have, particularly when it's not your full-time job, I mean, I was doing that as a third job at the time, is so small that even if you wanted to add every ounce of effort you could to one particular gig, all you're doing then is sucking time off all the shows. That all of them have to be mildly successful, more so than one good one, and then a bunch of real shockers. Yeah. But as a band, you want to think that everyone's doing their utmost for just your gig. And the reality is that the people at the venue just can't. Like, that's what I've tried to tell people. That
Would you say that the responsibility is a lot more on the band than they usually think to?
it shouldn't be, but the reality is that it is.
See, I would agree with you there.
Yeah, I agree.
We've said that ourselves.
Bands take very little responsibility when they don't realise that, unfortunately, with smaller operations, I mean, it might be different if it's Festival Hall or sound work, like one of the huge touring companies, but if it's just your local venue in the country.
No, like realistically, like for like a smaller venue, then responsibility realistically needs to fall upon the band to promote the show. Like, and that's always something that I've believed in. It's always something that I've prided myself in as being the absolute king of shameless self-promotion.
Well, you need to be.
Exactly right. And like, you know, whether that's, you know, you've got a CD coming out, or in old school, a group of MP3s coming out, or you know, or you've got a show, or you've got a video coming out, or whatever. Like, you've got to promote that.
And being a metal band, it does always feel like a venue's doing you a favour by letting you book a show there. So all they need to do is give me the show and I'll do the rest.
Yeah, well, maybe that's not fair that you felt that way. I mean, it probably depends on the venue, but
it's just a general.
Like if we were like, it would depend on the venue. Like, you know, like say for instance, if we were
the home and Sodens never, like that was always the home for it.
I guess it was always something that I felt, but there was a certain vibe of I was already in the role that I had, and Liam also before me, because he actually booked all the shows, including the very biggest ones, which he continued to do even when I was there. We were holding people's ability to get major support slots and headlining slots and album launch shows. We were already holding that over people's heads a little bit, being the only venue, to then say, oh, and by the way, you got to do all the work. That was, I mean, and I was probably not the personality that could just ignore the fact that I was also a guy that was trying to be in a band in the scene. It was a pretty rough spot to be in, and not in a way that I'm chasing sympathy, but just trying to get the balance right of how do there's certain people out there that wouldn't like me anyway because maybe I'm not offering the money they want, the dates they want, putting them on the support band that they want to play with X, and I gave it to somebody else. Yeah. There's probably people that are already frustrated to then go out to the whole scene and say, hey, by the way, I can't do very much for you. You got to bring all the people yourself. It's like, fuck you, Josh.
The one thing that I was always really happy with you when it came to you booking shows was that you didn't discriminate between who your mates and who weren't, sort of thing. Like,
that wasn't the role,
you would find the perfect band to play with whoever. Like, you know, like for instance, like when you put Tom and I on with 5 Star Prison Cell, you were like, I couldn't think of any bands that would better suit them than you guys. You know, it was always just a recurring theme. Like you would pick the perfect bands to go with them. Whereas, like, you know, when O'Malley started doing shows, it became pretty apparent that the guys booking those shows were putting on their mates with the bigger shows. Like when what was it? It was the Red, like for instance, when the Red Shore came through, and I'm Atlas got the support, and like not to downplay Atlas. Like, they were a great band in their own right.
Their main songwriter's our guitarist now, so.
Yeah, boy. But
the singer's my best friend, yeah. Or one of the singers, but I know what you mean.
yeah,
Maybe.
like they
Not the ideal choice, really.
No, they weren't the ideal choice.
Nothing against them. Yeah.
No, nothing against them. Like, they were like all of those dudes were great friends to my old band, and to I think at one stage, throughout the 2010, the only bands playing around here were Atlas, Tom's band, and my band.
Yeah. But yeah, there was probably other bands around that would have suited the lineup.
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess there's always, particularly in places like most of the venues around here where you don't have in-house production and a dedicated room.
Yeah.
It always comes down to dollars and cents. Yeah. And sometimes the perfect band, they might be at the end of a cycle where they're really overexposed, where they've played just too much to have pulling power on a ticketed show. There could be a lot of reasons. Yeah. And it could come down to something as simple as, Ben, you're one of the few people that maybe can contend with Dan for vicious but yet effective promotion. If you're thinking about which band is going to make sure that every single person knows that Redshaw are playing, Dan Caulfield is the number one guy. Maybe not so much then because the tools weren't as good. But if you picked bands out of a hat now, how am I going to get people to know about a show? Part of it comes down to which local band's going to do the most work.
Yeah.
And I think creatives in general tend to not like to talk about money, but money is a major factor in it.
Oh, definitely.
If this band's going to make more money, then you book them.
Yeah, those things.
Yeah.
Like I had a lot of incident, definitely not with either of the bands you guys are in, because you probably wouldn't be in bands with people like this, but nights where the opening band on a gig somehow became very self-referential in the fact that, the venue's full, we should now be able to go to the venue booker and demand more money, when they're playing with 2 or 3 other bands that pulled a full venue full of people and there was 5 people watching them at the start.
Yeah, no, fuck that.
I had those conversations.
Doing it for the wrong reason.
Even from people around here.
Yeah.
I'm like, we could have, if it had been, we never did it, but I know venues do, they do a guarantee plus percentage of bar.
Yeah.
Like, there are venues around here that have trialled that. That's fine, but that was part of what made the scene. It almost sucked the energy out of you as a booker, to be honest, when there's people in the scene that really haven't even got a leg up yet that are asking you for you to pull them up and give them heaps of cash when they're not prepared to do any work. It's like, if you can't go out and put up a $10 poster, like do a run, I'm not going to pay you an extra $1,000 to turn up because no one's getting that. Yeah, sorry, mate, you're not getting paid more than a headline.
If they're really worried about that, they're doing it for the wrong reason.
Exactly right.
Turned on.
And I'm sure that focus on the money side of things, I mean, there's the other side. You could be like me, where I was so completely not that way. Yeah. It wasn't until I started booking shows and I found out exactly how little money professional bands have to try and live off that I started to realise, okay, well, maybe the money conversation is more important than I thought it was. Yeah. People do see music and money as being a bit closer together than I do. Yeah. But then there's people that just saw them as it's an avenue to make extra cash.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, go deliver a pizza. Now you can drive for Uber. There's other ways to make money.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
If we want to make money, you don't become a musician.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right.
I mean, if you do, then you join a cover band.
Or if you do, you don't buy 30 fucking expensive guitars like I did. Right, so we might come right forward now, guys, and just talk about, with this record, something that fascinates me is the last CD that I made with a band came out in 2012. It took 12 or 14 months to make and a shitload of hours. And you guys, from what I can tell, I'm not sure about the drums, where they were done, but you're making essentially a record in your house, which wasn't even conceivable even 10 years ago that it could have the quality that you guys are putting out there. And I mean, there were progenitors to that sound, like the early Periphery record and those sort of things where you're like, wow, they're getting amazing sounds, mostly digital, but the drums were tracked live. And they would have been doing it, like running all of their digital equipment probably through really high-end, cab modelers and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Whereas now you're doing it essentially from home. Yeah,
our drums are programmed, but that's out of necessity. I just got to the point where it was so hard to put a band together and so frustrating that I was like, I'm just going to sit down for 2 years and learn how to do this myself. And
musicians are the fucking worst people.
Just for anyone who's listening, they don't quite get what you mean there. Like, let's maybe first talk about what what you mean by programmed, and then we'll talk about how maybe that suits your style of music anyway. So yeah. So when you say programmed, do you want to just tell us what that is, Tom? So
basically, just you have a map and you draw out what each drum is doing, and it's sent to a sampler. And what the sampler is doing is someone has pre-recorded drums for you, and they've
a perfect sound.
Yeah, and they have multiple hits at different volumes, and you can decide basically what hit you want with velocities and
different mic placements and everything.
It's become so easy to make realistic sounding program drums now that it's kind of gotten to the point where unless you can do drums really well, you're probably better off programming them.
Do you think does that hold across most styles of music, or just for your particular genre?
No, definitely not. I think anything with as little dynamics as we have.
Yeah.
I think if you were trying to do like a stoner rock or an indie rock thing, you'd definitely know. Yeah.
Okay, so essentially, just for people that maybe still can't quite visualize what you're doing, it's basically a quantized map on the screen where it's basically you're placing things on a vertical line which represents a beat or a quarter note.
Yeah, you have
however you decide to break the
piano roll, a keyboard, and each note is a particular drum, and you just draw a dot.
So essentially, you're drawing drums.
Yeah.
If you want things to happen contemporaneously, they're right on top of each other, I would assume, as you would if you were writing a score.
Yeah. But in speaking of the quantize thing, I don't quantize program drums. That's one of the big mistakes people make.
Maybe for the people who were thinking that's where you're going, do you want to just describe what the quantize
So quantizing would be everything perfectly in time. So say if you have a kick and a snare, they're on top of each other, straight on top of each other, whereas I will move them around.
Yeah. So do you do that to try and make it sound a little bit more like a real human being? Yeah. Because I think that for a lot of us that we're used to hearing, particularly for me, because I was much more into, and I probably was part of why I didn't like Carnival argument at the time, I was much more into 70s progressive bands than I ever was into the new bands.
Yeah.
Rush and Pink Floyd and bands of that nature and Genesis. Yeah. Having heard real, like highly technical drums, but drums that were real for so long.
You definitely still can tell the difference.
The quantized thing made it all feel like someone had just nudged things. And it felt like you were kind of being squashed a bit.
And it makes things sound narrower too.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I mean. Like it's all being
it's
pushed together all
loses its natural width. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially you're drawing the drum, which that's a talent in and of itself, something I wouldn't be able to do. So
it drives me nuts, I'll be honest.
I bet it does. And was that something, I'm not sure if Ben was involved from day one, but was that learning process, was that something that basically Ben had to just be prepared for you to learn and get your head around, or were you still...
I think you've basically spent the last 2 years just
waiting,
sitting around tapping your foot like, come on. Hurry.
Yeah, I didn't really have much to do with the writing process when it came to the music. Because I'm not a musician. I pick up a microphone and yell at it. Yeah. But,
and I just lock myself in my cave and don't come out until it's done. So.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't really have much to do with the recording side of things, even though it is something that I'd love to get into. It's just, I'm not going to bother making excuses. I don't know why I haven't done it yet.
Well, I've got all this equipment. I've got a room full of gear here, and I'm highly technical with the podcast stuff and voiceover type stuff. But if you asked me to sit here and try and record a guitar sound into Logic, if it was any more difficult than putting an SM7B on my bad cat cab over there and just playing a note, I wouldn't fucking know what to do with it after that. Like compressors or reverbs or anything, the note sounds like what I played, that's it. Yeah, so that's probably not such a bad thing. So was there writing, like, were the songs in some form
some of those songs
as demos, or they'd been around?
Some of those songs have been around for a while.
One of them's a Nemes Fixie song that we just bailed on halfway through, and then I've recovered it years later.
So you were already, obviously by the sounds of that, you were moving in this potential direction anyway at some point.
And it didn't really work with that band, and then I left that, and just kind of just what I always wanted to do. Yeah. I love making weird sounds.
I was during my quote unquote research for this episode, which sounds weird when I actually know you both. But I was trying to put the timeline together. It felt like this band had been coming in and out of my visibility over a long period of time. But maybe I was just confused, and it might have been other projects.
Well, Quinny wasn't actually in it when I released the first single. It was my solo project, and it actually says featuring Ben Quinn on the YouTube video and everything. And then we did the one song, and I just realised I couldn't do it without him. No, I was like, no one else is going to be able to do it that good, so I may as well just turn this into an actual band.
Fuzzy moments. Yeah. Okay. So just with the recording process, obviously, I was assuming you're using digital modelling for most of the other instruments as well, whether it's
gotten
the bass or the guitar.
So good now, like it's
something I actually might talk to you once we're done today about. I want to start recording guitar demos again for these songs I'm writing, but figure out an easy way to just plug in and do it.
Every year something comes out and I'm like, it's gotten even better. I have to spend more money. Like.
It's amazing just how far it's come. Like even just like 10 years ago, like to set up a decent studio to get the sounds that Tom's gotten, you'd need tens of thousands of dollars, almost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now it's
I've probably spent 20 grand, but that's over a period of 10 years, slowly accumulating things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just like the technology that's available to be able to to do this is just so readily available now, and it's so affordable, and it's incredible. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about maybe from the vocal point of view? Obviously, that's something that's got to come from a real human being.
If you want an insight into that, you can go watch our Facebook Live videos of when we recorded it. There's a lot of swearing and a lot of drunken yelling, but
yeah, it's
good fun.
But it's all me. It's and a good old fashioned 7B.
Yeah,
Sure, SM7B. I'm looking at yours in the background.
Yeah, I've got one over there.
Yeah, boy.
It just we would have actually had one of you guys on one, but it just takes so much juice to get a sound out of it.
I
had to buy an external preamp just to get it.
Yeah, I've got one here, but I didn't have enough cables to plug it in. Okay, so let's talk about putting real vocals into a predominantly digital environment. How, when you're mixing that all together, do you find this? Is it easier or harder than in maybe an analog situation to find the space for a vocal?
It's just harder with what we do with all the electronic stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Because I spend most of my time making room for vocals, carving out space in everything just to get them to even sit there properly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I spend the most time on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been fascinating for me to think, like, the sound, like the vocals actually had some real presence, and I've heard a lot of pretty heavy music which was made, not in a massive studio, where the vocals are really just lost in the modern production style.
I think that was our main concern. I wanted to be a vocal band. I wanted to be all about him, and that's a conscious decision. Like it's also arrangement. You put things in certain places and knowing that there's going to be vocals there, and you have to think about it beforehand.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, the thing I probably liked most about the sounds that I've heard is that the thing I find hardest to distinguish when it comes to vocals and the modern production style of a lot of heavy music is that every sound has a lot of timbre in it now. Yeah. And it's a lot of, it's almost like there's a wacky crack sound to absolutely
everything has a lot of transient.
Yeah. And it's like all of that sound together is space which normally used to have, to me, more vocal room there. Because every guitar sound now sounds like gang, 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 gang.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But when you're competing directly with certain ranges of the human voice, it can just sound like one massive drum kit to me.
Yeah, definitely.
I that's one of the things I've battled the most is getting the guitars to even be able to be heard over all those synths. Like it's just one big balancing act, just moving things, trying to get things to sit right. And
and for me, as a vocalist, this is one thing that I've never had to worry about with any of the bands that I've been in was, coming from a predominantly a death metal and a thrash metal background. Basically, all I had to do was just get up there and look angry and go. Whereas now, like I've actually had to worry about pitch and projection and all of this sort of stuff.
I'm really anal about that stuff.
Yeah.
And like how a phrase sounds for what it's saying. I think you said you'd never thought of that before.
Yeah.
Whereas I'll be like, you need to say it this way because you're trying to say this. You need to, like it's all about the emotion. That's how people connect to vocalist.
And it's been like, and just like even just like timing as well. Like timing's always been something that I've prided myself on as as a vocalist. But with Trancestate, it's just been on a whole different level. It's been like, oh, you need to come in on this kick or on this snare.
So there's obviously a lot of phrasing, attention to phrasing.
Yeah, phrasing and just precision that I never really had to deal with before now. But I'm glad I've done it because it's improved my performance.
Speaking of phrasing on a bit of a tangent, was it you, Ben, that was linking to a Lamb of God Chester Bennington song the other day? Was that you that did that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a whole section in the middle of that song where the phrasing is very, like, it's very unique and weird.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, it just got me thinking about vocal phrasing. Like, it really did. I was like, wow, that was all phrased in a really weird, unique way.
Yeah. Bennington had a real knack for.
And that's funny, we're talking about a guy that I think we all knew secretly was one of the best singers on the planet, but we never would have admitted to ever wanting to listen to him.
No,
whereas 10 years, 20 years later, we're like, oh, the guy was obviously maybe not in my favourite band.
Hybrid Theory and Meteora still get me.
I'm not a
every
massive fan of the bands.
Yeah.
Like the music so much as his vocals were always pretty good.
His I think that was the thing with them is just like his vocals were always the standpoint. Like I listened to Mike Shinoda and he sound. Yeah, how everybody has that one mate that thinks they're a rapper and they start and you just go like, bro, for fuck's sake, shut up. Like that's how I think of Mike Shinoda.
Yeah, agreed. I think it was a lot of, I'm writing all the songs on the guitar and the keyboard and the drums and everything else, so I have to be in the band.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it was like,
I can kind of rap and play piano at the same time.
It was like,
okay, Jesus. Righto, guys. What do you want to just tell us what's going to happen with this record, and then we'll probably finish up. So
we are finalising now. We'll have a date in a couple of weeks of when we want to put it out. We're talking about today. We're going to do pre-orders a month before, and if you pre-order it, you get it the minute you pre-order it as a digital download.
Okay. That's cool.
Kind of an incentive.
So is it a pre-order for a physical copy?
Physical, yeah. And it's all going to be for free download when it comes out anyway, so people don't have to buy it. But some people still collect CDs maybe.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, and this might be the third tangent for today. I have been listening to the latest Coheed and Cambria CD on CD in my car.
It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
And I forgot just how much richer the sound is off the CD. And it's not meant to be because I'm streaming Spotify at 320 kilobits a second.
Yeah, it's funny that it's only 16-bit too, but it just seems...
I think that, and this is probably a little bit audio geekishness, I think it's because even if you select the highest bit rate, I mean, it might be different if you're downloading everything first, but if you're actually streaming a song, the moment-to-moment quality you're getting can actually vary quite a bit, and it only really averages out.
You're also relying on the quality of your hardware as well.
Yeah.
You're going from a phone to Bluetooth to all that.
Yeah.
Every little step makes a detriment. Yeah.
There are a lot of devices where I know like that the actual internal modems of the device itself can't really perform optimally streaming it full bit rate, whether it's YouTube or music. Yeah. And then you're right, you're putting it through what maybe costs $1.50 to make a set of earbuds or however you're going to listen to it, or fucking Beats by Dre.
So going back to the recording thing, that's the issue with recording gear at the moment too. We're getting to the point where the software is that good, but our computers aren't powerful enough to run it yet. Yeah. So we're just at a stalemate.
Well, this is a 2012 iMac.
Yeah.
And I
have a 2010 Mac Pro, so I
completely maxed it out when I bought it. I got the fastest video card, the RAM, the CPU, which I think it's an i7, which at the time was the fastest one you could get. And I did that all instead of getting a 27-inch.
Yeah.
And the price worked out about the same. And it's only just started to slow down now when I've downloaded I don't know whether either of you are aware of the company Isotope.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of audio repair, which is what
RX.
is part of what's going to make today sound a lot better than it sounds at the moment when I finish doing it.
I use Ozone for mastering. So
that's the mastering program. Yeah. Well, I use a lot of what's called RX7, which is audio repair tools, removes mouth noise and reverb from the room or whatever.
Yeah.
The computer's really starting to choke on that. And I've got a 2017 MacBook Pro, and I was thinking, oh, fuck, I really don't want to have to dedicate my laptop, which cost me a fucking fortune. It was twice what this cost.
Fuck.
And I was like, I don't really want to have one of those cradles and then have a screen.
Yeah.
I went and priced the 2018 iMac Pro. And I was thinking, wait a sec. Because I went through and checked all the boxes, just basically maxed out everything except I only want this size screen because the 27-inch 5K Retina screen is over $1,000 alone. And it came to $14,500. $14,500.
I've done the same thing.
It is,
that's why I'm glad because I got a Mac Pro Tower 2010, and I'm so glad I got that because I've already priced completely maxing it out, upgrading it all, and I can actually do it because it's a tower. I'm so glad I did that.
So I'm just going to put an SSD in this.
Yeah, and that'll make a world of difference.
Change the actual RAM out for better quality RAM if I can, and try and get another couple of years out of it. But I'm resigned myself to the fact that now I'm going to have to just buy a really expensive monitor and then run my laptop into this because the laptop is pretty powerful and cost me $5,000 as opposed to 15.
Yeah, I kind of priced mine out. I think I can spend $5,000.
Like that doesn't seem like much when
mine out.
All of us have spent fortunes on. Yeah, like you just bought a guitar that probably cost more than my Corolla, but
no, it was actually surprisingly cheap.
Yeah, so righto, guys. Well, thank you for joining me on Punching Sideways.
Too easy.
Thanks for having us.
A lot of fun.
Thank you to Tristan Tate, who did the artwork for this show.
I love Tristan.
Oh, beautiful boy.
And he's helping me with some artwork for a little project I'm going to stick on the end of these episodes soon.
Ooh, you're damn right he is.
I always get excited when I'm waiting for his artwork to come back.
Oh, don't we all?
Yeah. Actually, I think most of the initial downloads for this show came from having a really cool caricature that he did. I don't think people actually knew what it was that they were clicking on. They just wanted to see a larger version of the picture. Yeah. So thanks, Tristan.
Thank you, bro.
Righto. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks,
hopefully when the record's out, I can get you back on and we can talk about how things are progressing as it rolls out.
Sounds good.
Righto.
Definitely, man.
Catch up.
Catch. Stuck condemned to rot in a silicon